So between the years of 2000 and 2006, it was quite an experimental time at the Royal Canadian Mint for Canadian pennies, and because of this, 6 different varieties were actually created for the Canadian 2006 penny, and amongst those, there is a Holy Grail penny that can be worth crazy amounts of money. In the past, I've discussed some of the Holy Grail coins that have been discovered or that you can actually find, but there are a few modern coins that are as rare and valuable as the 2006 P non-magnetic Canadian penny. The thing about this coin is that you actually have a decent chance of finding one of them if you hunt pennies regularly. I have actually heard of Canadian coin roll hunters stumbling upon this rare gem. It is honestly one of the most well-known and looked for pennies in Canada that you actually have a decent chance of finding eventually. In terms of its scarcity, this penny actually reminds me a lot to the 1922 to 1925 George V pennies. These pennies, although extremely rare and hard to come by, are not impossible to find, and even in low-grade examples of both the 2006 P non-magnetics and also some of the early 1920s small pennies, they can all be worth minimum of $20 to $30, even at the bottom of their grading tier. So very similar values and scarcity for these Canadian pennies. So stay tuned, because I'm definitely going to be making some videos in the future on those early 1920s Canadian small cents. They can be worth just absolutely insane money. But what do you say we discuss the values and specifications of these 2006 Canadian pennies? Because as I mentioned, there are 6 different varieties, and some of them can be worth some okay money, some of them can be worth pretty much face value, and some of them can be worth a whole heck of a lot of money. And I'm also going to talk briefly about an extremely valuable 2005 Canadian penny out of a proof set that you should definitely have on your radar as well. So let's get into the values of these coins. I'm going to start with these 2005s because they're actually a little bit easier. Now, in terms of value, the 2005s are not too rare or too valuable, at least to find the business strikes or circulation examples. But there exists an extremely rare and valuable variety for the 2005 Canadian pennies, and it is actually a proof strike, and that is the 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof penny. Now, just to give you guys an idea of the values of the 2005 Canadian pennies, the 2005 regular Canadian proof strike, so no P mint mark, is worth around $1.95 for a PL64 example, and can be worth around $40 for a PL67. The 2005 P from the proof sets, the magnetic example, is worth around $1.45 for a PL64 and can be worth all the way up to $32.90 for a PL67. And then we have the 2005 P non-magnetic. Now this thing is a holy grail. Your chance of finding it in a coin roll hunt is pretty much slim to nil, but never say never. I have seen much crazier things happen. Your best chance of finding one of these 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof pennies is to carry a magnet around with you, go to coin shops, flea markets, maybe check Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji and look for 2005 Canadian proof sets with P mint marks, and basically you just got to throw that magnet onto the penny, and if it doesn't stick to the penny, you might have a holy grail coin that can be worth $1,150 for a PL64 and all the way up to $3,290 for a PL67. This is one of the holy grails of the modern Canadian pennies. There were very few examples struck, so definitely keep your eyes out for 2005 P proof sets, and if you have a magnet with you, maybe just give that penny a little tap, and if it doesn't stick, then you might have a jackpot on your hands. Alright, so what do you say we start going through the 2006 pennies? I'm going to discuss the compositions as well as some of the identifying factors of these pennies, so that way you can find the ones that are worth good money, because there are 2 of the 2006 pennies that can be extremely rare and valuable. So the first one that we are going to discuss is not going to be one of the rare ones, and that is the 2006 with a P mint mark, and this is a magnetic example. So to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the Queen. It will also have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, in terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60, so pretty much worth face value at the bottom of the MS scale, maybe slightly more. And this one can be worth $73.70 for an MS67 example, which is an extremely high grade example. Now, next up, we're actually going to discuss the rarest and most valuable of the 2006 Canadian pennies, and that is the 2006 P non-magnetic. So basically, to identify this one, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the Queen. This coin will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. Now, one of the great things about the rare 2006 pennies that also makes them one of the most searched for pennies here in Canada when it comes to coin roll hunting is that they actually have a pretty decent value on the low end. Now, the 2006p non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF12, so that is pretty much at the bottom of the Sheldon scale. Even if it is absolutely beat up, sat in a parking lot, you're going to be getting $10 or $20 for this coin. People want them for their collection, and even though they are out there, they are honestly a unicorn, and you almost never stumble across them. So as I mentioned, this 2006p non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF example. It can be worth $132 for an almost uncirculated 50. And then on the high end, it can be worth $500 for an MS60 and all the way up to $2,000 for an MS65. This is a fairly recent penny. I have found coins much older in a high mint state before, so your chances of finding one of these and it actually being in decent condition is not too terrible, honestly. So always keep your eyes out for the 2006 pennies and throw your 2006 Ps to the side. Check them with the magnet, and if that magnet does not stick, then you have yourself one extremely rare coin. Now next we'll get into the 2006s with the Royal Canadian Mint logo. Now there is a non-magnetic and a magnetic. Neither of these are particularly rare or valuable. The first we will discuss is the 2006 non-magnetic with the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the bust. To identify it, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust, and this will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 10 cents for an MS60, and it can be worth up to $45.30 for an MS67, which is an extremely high grade. And then we have the 2006 Royal Canadian Mint logo with a magnetic planchette. To identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for that Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette, and it can be worth around $1.95 for an MS60 and around $177 for an MS67. So this is definitely the rare of the two varieties, and it may be a good idea to pull a few of these to the side if you're a coin roll hunter. The 2006 Royal Canadian Mint magnetic seems to be the rare and more valuable of the two. And the last two varieties for the Canadian 2006 pennies that we are going to discuss today are the 2006s without any mint marks. Now, just like the previous four pennies mentioned, there is a magnetic and non-magnetic example for the 2006 Canadian penny with no mint mark. The rare one of the two is the 2006 magnetic. First, we'll discuss the 2006 non-magnetic. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and there will be no P or no logo of the Royal Canadian mint mark under the Queen's bust, and it will also have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60 example, and can be worth around $47 for an MS67. So very similar prices on the high end for the more common of the 2006 coins. And then we have the second of the Holy Grail 2006 pennies, and that is the 2006 magnetic no mint mark. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and you are looking for no mint mark under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, it was not made in sets, it was only released in circulation. I have still yet to find either of these two of the rare 2006 pennies, but I shall keep looking, and maybe, just maybe, I will have my day. In terms of value, the 2006 magnetic no mint mark can be worth around $75 for an MS60 and all the way up to $863 for an MS67. This one isn't super valuable on the low end. It can be worth around $10 to $20 if it's in a low grade state. People still really want it for their collections. And because you almost never stumble across these things in the wild, people are always willing to pay a premium to add them to their collection. If you ever did find one of these, I would suggest trying to sell it on maybe eBay or Facebook Marketplace. That's usually where you get the most amount of money for these coins. You can maybe try taking it to your local coin shop, but they're usually not interested in varieties like this. They might pay you like a couple dollars or something like that if you're lucky.